Okay, good morning. I'm going to record because I'm at the airport at JFK in New York City, where I basically live, and I noticed something super interesting today in respect to identification. So, of course, in the United States, the agency now, and since 2001 or 2002, so post September 11th in 2001, an agency was created called Transport Security Administration. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security as a part of the U.S. federal government, which is, the security checkpoints. It's not border control, but it's the domestic travel where, you're showing your identification in order to travel. So what we've seen in the United States over the past couple of years is the creation of a number of programs either to bypass that security by giving information about your ID in advance. So in respect to the government side, there's TSA pre-check, global entry, to cross the borders more quickly. But what's of interest to me is the creation now of private corporations doing the same that are actually bypassing the government. So one of such organizations is called Clear. And it's a private company that is subcontracts or contracts with the federal government to work in partnership in the airport. So the trade-off there with Clear is that you are, as a private citizen, giving up your biometric data, so eyes, fingerprints, additional supporting documentation, and some additional biometrics in order to skip the line, right? So trading up very important data for convenience. And what is interesting today, so I'm at the airport. I've basically lived in this airport most of my life, and this line I've watched over the past few years where, each different qualification people keep getting it, so they have to keep adding new programs. So there's Clear, now there's Clear Plus, there's Clear Reserve, there's Clear Plus. And in order to get each status, you have to give up more and more information. And it's quite intriguing to me to watch people readily give up their private data, their private information in order to skip a line in an airport. It's actually quite an interesting social experiment. And the thing to note here, it's not the willingness to give up the private data. That we already do on a daily basis. I'm doing it right here on this phone. Anytime I log into any service that I use. What's interesting to me is that it's a private corporation. And so, there's a centralized entity that is not a government. Governments being maybe, the roles of them, of course, are varied depending on where you are, but one of such things is managing, let's say, ID of its citizens and various programs associated with it. And so passing that off, almost delegating this to the private sector. And what's I would say concerning to me, but I will just pose this as a question and not necessarily a statement, is the level of data and biometrics tied to an individual that is now in the hands of a company that can be swayed based on finances, based off of who is paying them, based off of corruption. So, when we think about this, it's not just the experiment that's happening in airports. It's perhaps, what you're seeing in supermarkets or grocery stores. So people scanning ID in order to automate their payments and checkout. Is it going to be used for people to transport between different cities to scan their ID? Once these 15-minute cities or smart cities with various districts are created, and I by no means are advocating for this. I think it is quite dystopian. So again, the thing that I'm thinking about today at this airport is over the past 20 years, under the pretenses or auspices of national security. And again, this is in the U.S., so it's a very U.S.-centric viewpoint, though of course these things are happening in a number of countries in a far more centralized, or I'd say nefarious way. The question I pose is that who owns your identity? Who should, if anyone? So again, my personal belief system, and I have no problem sharing this, comes from a perspective of autonomy, of freedom, of people having the freedom and autonomy to own their own data, particularly important data such as me, who I am, and my access to certain things based on who I am. So it's just amusing today at 6 a.m. in the airport.